So next speaker will be Dr. Pierre Meulien. Dr. Pierre Meulien is Executive Director of the Innovative Medicines Initiative, IMI, a €5 billion public-private partnership between the European Union and the European pharmaceutical industry. At IMI, he is responsible for the overall management of the program, which works to improve and accelerate the drug development process by facilitating collaboration between the key players involved in health research. Previously, Dr. Meulien was President and CEO of Genome Canada, where he raised money and oversaw the launch of novel projects and networks in the field of genomics-based technologies. Prior to that, he was Chief Scientific Officer for Genome British Columbia and was a founding CEO of the Dublin Molecular Medicine Center. Dr. Meulien also worked with the French biotechnology company Transgene and with Aventis Pasteur. He has a PhD in molecular biology from the University of Edinburgh and carried out a postdoctoral fellowship at the Institut Pasteur in Paris. Today, he will talk about translational science through an open innovation platform, the Innovative Medicines Initiative. Please, Dr. Meulien.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that kind introduction, and thank you for the organizers for having invited me to Kyoto and present to you. It's a great honor. So I'm going to, if I could maybe have the first, thank you. I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of collaboration through open innovation. And of course, I'm going to use the example of the Innovative Medicines Initiative to do that. I do not have any conflicts of interest. And it is our 10th birthday, so I just thought I'd have a little celebration here as well as back at home. IMI is 10 this year, and so I'll hopefully tell you a little bit about what's happened in those 10 years. So of course, as you've already heard in this audience, this is no secret that there are profound changes ongoing in the world of healthcare, driven, of course, by the great science and technology, including more and more things happening in the digital space. The epidemiology of disease is changing in terms of the burden of chronic disease, as well as outbreaks like Ebola and Zika that the world has seen over the past few years. And a welcome change, I think, is also the role and behavior of the consumer of healthcare, the patient, that I believe will be driving the agenda more and more over in the future. And of course, the economics we know are unsustainable for a lot of these things we are trying to innovate. So the actors, and there are many actors involved in the space, of course, each of those need to change and adapt to a new ecosystem, which hopefully will be more efficient and will help the way forward. Now, in order for many actors to come and contribute, we need a neutral space to do that. And the concept of open innovation is not particularly new. This is Henry Chesbrough in 2003. He kind of invented the concept, although people were doing it, of course, well beforehand. But his take on it was very much from a business perspective, where the traditional business was relying far too much on its internal focus, its internal R&D to do things, even though there were probably a few external arrangements with academia and other business-to-business arrangements. It was certainly not enough to get the job done. So this was very much combining internal and external ideas into architectures and systems whose requirements would be defined by a business model. Now, since then, of course, many people have been taking this and adapting it to their particular ecosystem. And in Europe, we have done this too, of course. And Carlos Moedas, who's the European Commissioner for Research, Science and Innovation, in 2016 wrote a little book about this, open innovation, including more general ideas of openness in terms of open science and open to the world. And he was looking at this from a European standpoint, where a lot of criticisms in Europe about the lack of innovation, the lack of entrepreneurship, the lack of venture capital funding, and so on and so forth. And this was very much in line with things that were happening both in the world, in Europe, and of course in the area of healthcare. So the Innovative Medicines Initiative had started well before 2016. Indeed, the first phase of IMI was started in 2008 and was a huge experiment to see if the public and private sectors, the public being represented by the European Commission and the private by the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries and their associations, could actually work together. And so after IMI 1, we started, and I wasn't there for IMI 1, we started then a new phase of IMI, very innovatively called IMI 2. And this is a schematic about how IMI 2 is constructed, and I thought I'd just spend a minute or two talking a little bit about the differences between the structure of IMI 1 and IMI 2. So IMI 2, we're in the middle of it. In fact, we have only 2 more years, 2019 and 2020, for the last allocations in IMI 2. It is an overall budget of nearly 3.3 billion euro. On the left-hand side, as you're watching your screen, the blue side of the screen talks a little bit about the money coming from the public side. So this is cash, and this goes to the groups on the extreme left. So universities, small, medium-sized enterprises like biotech companies. Some mid-sized companies are allowed to receive funding from IMI if they have a revenue of less than 500 million euro per annum. But we can also, very importantly, fund patient groups. We can fund national regulators. We can fund national HTA bodies, health technology assessors, and several other groups who are part of this very important ecosystem. And in order to have this end-to-end integration idea from research to use, all of these actors need to be on the same platform at the same time, talking about the same thing. On the right-hand side, we have contributors to the program. Now, traditionally, and in IMI 1, that was only FPA, but as you can see, there are a number of other entities now that can play in the same sandpit of IMI. The 1.4 billion coming from FPA companies. They do not receive funding. They contribute mostly in kind. Of about that 1.4, there's probably about 10% in cash. But what interests us is really the brains, the industrial expertise that come and know-how that come with the people who are currently in industry, getting integrated completely in these projects. That's the value that we see. We have other opportunities for so-called associated partners to join us, and we're very happy that people like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Wellcome Trust, the Hemsley Trust, Simons Research Foundation, JDRF have joined us as associated partners, and that allows them to become strategists as well as contributors to the program. Now, of course, like in any public-private partnership, there has to be, the outcomes have to be beneficial and add value to both the public and the private sectors. And there's an assurance on the public side immediately through the creation of a strategic research agenda, and the IMI 2 SRA is very focused on the WHO priority medicines. This was a document that came out from the WHO in 2013 and really described those areas that were not only the great ones of medical need, but those as well that were burdening our health systems to a great degree. So it's no really surprise, and it's quite an exhaustive and broad list. So that's on the public side. And the private side, of course, they were hoping that we could help them address this inefficiency. I mean, the pharmaceutical industry, I think Professor Fitzgerald already alluded to this, is one of the most inefficient R&D machines in the world, and this needs to be fixed if we want to have a reasonably sustained drug pricing system and so on and so forth. So our mission is really, and I'm just going to hit, you can read this, I'm just going to hit on a few keywords: open collaboration, accelerating patient access to, and of course, especially in the areas of unmet medical need. So that's our mission, and we do this by trying to bring all actors for a particular topic onto the same platform so that we don't go down, or we can try and avoid going down blind alleys if we talk to the regulators first, if we include the patient groups. It's amazing how valuable the patients can be, the patient voice can be in our co-designing things. And of course, bring in the regulators, the imaging, the tech people, biotechs, and all that's required to get a particular job done. So the current INMI investment portfolio looks a bit like this. You can see that there's a very large green balloon in the middle, over €1 billion, and that is reflective of one of our big topics, which is antimicrobial resistance, because this is a clear public health need, but without any market. There is no volume play to be had in this area, but we need to incentivize drug development in this area, otherwise things will not get done. We also have quite a big bubble in brain disorders, and I will talk a little bit about the program both in AMR and in Alzheimer's disease as examples of what we're doing in the last few minutes of the talk. So what we've built through that investment is, I think, a mini ecosystem looking at the international cross-sector community, whether they be made up of SMEs, patient groups, universities, industry members, partners of industry, including medtech and diagnostic companies, regulators, and of course our associated partners. And we hope that this is going to build efficiency into quite a complex system. I'm going to illustrate some of the things we've done through two quick examples. One is an Alzheimer's disease, which needs no introduction. And as you know, the pharmaceutical companies have failed, the pharmaceutical industry has failed to bring anything tangible to Alzheimer's disease over the past decade, and have been competing on using the same targets, competing for same clinical cohorts, and failing and spending €10 billion doing that. So a new model is drastically needed for something like Alzheimer's disease. And so we've divided up our portfolio in this, and we have roughly a €250 million investment from both the public and private sectors in these challenges. And this is, of course, looking at identifying subgroups of dementia, so looking at deep phenotyping, as well as family history. Challenge 2 is around the risk susceptibilities of people getting dementia and using big data sets to do that. Looking at new ways of performing clinical trial design. Once you have stratified, can you actually come in earlier? Because I think we've proved that going into late-stage dementia is actually futile. So can we go in earlier but we need to have the patients involved and their families involved right at the beginning in that kind of discussion, because of course there are lots of ethical issues and regulatory issues to be looked at there. And of course we can't have a credible Alzheimer's disease programs without advanced imaging and a whole challenge dedicated to that. So not only do we have those projects that are in the centerpiece running across Europe, but obviously we need to have significant links with other parties across the world, and we do that, of course, whether that's through the Human Brain Project, Dementias Platforms UK, and many other instances. The other then example is on AMR. Once again, this topic needs no introduction, and once again we're addressing it through a portfolio of projects, looking right from the research, pretty fundamental stuff going on in translocation, looking at efflux and membrane proteins there in terms of trying to get the drug into the bug and keeping it there. But we're also enabling small biotech companies to come in and have their molecules assessed in preclinical testing and getting them to go into clinical trials eventually. And then we have a whole series of networks of clinical research infrastructures, because the clinical research infrastructure that you need for developing these particular drugs is very challenging. So we have a whole network of both clinical assessment sites in Europe and laboratory networks to to go through different testing. We also have, because of the specific economic challenge, especially as to, relating to who is going to pay for this investment and how is the pricing system going to work and continue to incentivize industry to buy into this field, we had a whole project called Drive AB, which was looking at different options for both push and pull mechanisms in order for us to move forward. So here's the portfolio. It's a 650 million euro budget from the public and the private side allocated to all of these projects that I discussed very briefly. So I'm going to finish there, maybe saying a few more words about what we're trying to create is this platform. We really need to have it so that the value is to the public and the private. There are specific rules, of course, for the private sector. They have to agree to share and collaborate with each other. And so a lot of what we do is in the so-called pre-competitive space, or where there is a severe market failure that does incentivize companies to work together. We build trustful collaboration. It's really, you can see this in the way the projects are driven. It's a culture change in the way we work, and we hope that we can attract others to join this neutral platform to do very important things and have real impact on not only our R&D portfolios, but on health systems eventually in Europe. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Meulien.